Okay, my secret pumpkin. This is a response video to your comments, the comments that you posted on my reply video to homosexuality and the Bible. So let's jump right in because I only got 10 minutes to record this. Um, and looking at your comments here, it says Scripture does not state that born eunuchs were those born without the capacity to have sex. Um, was there an epidemic of children, etc., etc. You can read the comments with birth defects, and this was only to regarding marriage and divorce. Now, there's a lot to assume. You're correct. That is to assume a lot. Um, uh, in researching eunuchs, you assume that the only reason for becoming a eunuch is because of harem keeping. I mean, you make the assumption that there are no other reasons that men became eunuchs in history, not just in the Bible, but in history. For example, I'm going to read an excerpt from Encyclopedia Americana, and it says here, eunuch, a castrated man traditionally employed in the women's quarters as a chamberlain or in the palace of a king. Also says here, in both East and West, however, most eunuchs became so as a condition of employment in the royal palace where there were many wives and concubines. Eunuchs were considered the most suitable guards, as the ruler himself, isolated by his power and fear of his enemies, turned to eunuchs as messengers and confidants. For this reason, poor parents in China sometimes had their sons castrated, and men underwent the operation at the palace gates in hope to obtain employment within. During some periods in Chinese history, palace eunuchs were effect rulers in China. Also, it states here that there were other positions that were traditionally held by eunuchs. Not only that, but in doing my research, as you suggested, I discovered that there were many rulers and generals, and let's see here. There were many and career soldiers that were eunuchs that made themselves eunuchs or became eunuchs um, because they didn't want the pressures of temptation by the opposite sex or even by the same sex. So let's not assume also that these men were heterosexual in the first place. I mean, let's not assume that just because they made the choice to become a eunuch that they were already heterosexual men. They could have been homosexual men. They just they made themselves eunuchs because they didn't want to face the sexual temptations that were afoot. Now, when Jesus mentioned eunuchs that were made eunuchs and eunuchs that made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom's sake, he was saying the same thing. Hey, there are some soldiers in God's army or some men that decided, hey, I don't want to face the temptations of having to worry about my sexuality on the rise at a time when I need to be preparing myself for battle, be it natural or spiritual. So let's do away with this portion and not have to worry about that. Now, um, I think I've addressed that well. Also, I want to ask you a question. Here's the question. The question is, if eunuchs refer to sexuality, if the term eunuch referred to sexuality and not to physical ability to perform or the physical ability to be sexual as a male, then why aren't women mentioned as eunuchs? Because I'm certain, just like they are today, there are women that were effeminate or women that were homosexual that enjoyed the company, the sexual pleasures of being with other women. The Bible mentions women lying with women. So why weren't women mentioned as eunuchs if that was the case? So I mean that's just a little food for thought. Also, just to point out something else, I found in doing some research that there were poor parents that knew that they were poor. They knew their children were poor. They didn't see any promise of any future for their children. So, in order to stop the cycle of poverty, they had their children castrated at birth. So, there again, how can you say that eunuchs were homosexuals? Now, you also mentioned that or your question was there a whole class of people with birth defects that Jesus had to mention them? No, but I believe there were significant in number to the fact that he wanted the disciples who he was talking to at in this particular case. Remember who he was talking to. He was talking to the disciples. There were enough in number that he wanted the disciples to really understand that there were some men that were born without the ability to perform sexually as a man. Now, also, I took your advice. I did some research about the animals, and yeah, I didn't base my entire supposition on my basset hound, but I did base my personal knowledge on that. Took your advice, did a little research, and I found out that there are non-gay males that couple themselves for life with other males. It's called typical male bonding. Okay. Now, in the animal kingdom, there are male animals that mate with other male animals for life, but the purpose of their union is not sexual. Okay, so we have to understand. Let's distinguish that when animals, when same-sex animals mate or couple themselves with other animals for life, if they get together and they couple themselves for life, the purpose of their union is not sexual. Remember, homosexuality, the purpose of that union is sexual. Now, I'm not saying that you don't love somebody. I'm not saying that homosexuals are not capable of loving each other. I'm not. That's totally beside the point. I'm saying that when the relationship goes from love and caring and cherishing and bonding with one another to a sexual relationship, then it becomes wrong. Now, so we have to understand that. Also, I want to say this. We're taking this scripture and we've really, really examined it, and in some cases over-examined it. I mean, because here it is, and we've looked at it from every angle I can think of. What happens then with the other scriptures where the Bible mentions that homosexuality is wrong? Are we to take this scripture and not and disregard all the rest? Okay, for example, First Corinthians 6 and 9. I mean, are we to take? I mean, that's just an example. Are we to take this scripture and then disregard that? It's been my experience that whenever a scripture is known to contradict another scripture, that there is a misinterpretation of that scripture. So in other words, if you take this scripture and use it to justify homosexuality, then what you are doing is, in turn, you are making it contradict other scriptures. And when that happens, there has got to be a misinterpretation somewhere. Scripture cannot contradict itself. If the Bible contradicted itself, if the Bible contradicted itself in any way, then the entire Bible would be useless. And that's just the bottom line truth. I mean, I believe that firmly. I believe that there is no way that this Bible, that this word can contradict itself. If it does, it is useless. And my personal, that's my personal truth. I believe that nothing God speaks can go against something else that He spoke. Every judgment God speaks has to come forth, has to, because if it does not, then if it does not, then it makes everything he says susceptible to error. So there you have it. Anxious to hear your response, so I hope you can reply quickly, be it video or written. And as I mentioned before, I post all comments, with the exception of those that are contain some type of profanity. Also, I just wanted to mention to you, you said here, I really appreciate you doing your best to refute the information in my video. However, in this instance, I believe you are in way over your head. Maybe so. I don't know. Maybe I am in over my head. I'm just a simple person. I'm nothing big. I'm no great